I've always been a skeptic. Ghost stories never really got to me until last summer. My cousin and I went on a road trip through California, and one of our stops was the Whaley House in San Diego. We figured it'd be fun, maybe creepy at best. But what happened inside that house didn't feel like a ghost story. It felt like something wanted us to never leave. I was staying in San Diego for a week, mostly just to get away from the noise of LA. My cousin Mike, who's always been into paranormal stuff, suggested we check out the Whaley House. I'd heard of it before. Some people call it the most haunted house in America. I didn't really buy into that, but I figured it'd be a cool spot to visit. Old history, creaky floors, weird vibes, whatever. We booked a late evening tour on a Friday. It wasn't a private one. There were maybe 8 other people in the group plus the guide. The house itself is beautiful from the outside. Old, quiet, kind of sad looking in a way I couldn't explain. There was this heavy stillness in the air as we walked up the front steps, like the whole house was holding its breath. The guide gave the usual intro, who the Whaleys were, how Thomas Whaley built the house over the site of an old gallows, how people say you can still hear the hangman's footsteps on the stairs. It was interesting, but I didn't feel anything weird. Not yet. About 20 minutes in, the group split up for a bit to explore. The guide said we could take our time on the second floor before meeting in the dining room. Mike wandered off to the courtroom while I took the staircase up. They say people often hear footsteps there, even when no one's around. As I walked up, the wood creaked under my feet, and I remember thinking, well, yeah, it's a 170-year-old house. Of course it's going to creak, but when I got to the top and turned into the hallway, something felt wrong. I don't know how to describe it. The air was just heavier, not hotter, not colder, just dense. I walked slowly down the hallway toward the nursery. There was a small rope blocking the entrance, but I leaned in to get a better look. That's when I heard it. A soft, almost inaudible giggle, high-pitched, like a little girl trying to stifle laughter. I froze. I looked around. The hallway was empty. Nobody had come upstairs after me. I stood still, holding my breath, thinking maybe it was a sound from outside. Then I heard it again, closer this time. Another giggle. It was coming from the nursery. I took a cautious step back, heart starting to pick up. I called out, "Hello?" Just loud enough, but not so loud that I looked like a crazy person if someone was watching. No answer, but then I noticed something strange. The doll on the chair by the window, it had shifted. I was sure of it. When I first leaned in, it had been facing the window. Now it was turned slightly, almost like it was looking toward the door. That's when I decided to go find Mike. I headed back down the stairs faster than I probably should have. The creaking seemed louder now, almost like someone or something was walking right behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to. When I reached the bottom, Mike was standing in the corner of the courtroom, looking up at the wall. I grabbed his arm and whispered, "We need to leave. Now." He looked at me, kind of confused, then nodded when he saw my face. We didn't wait for the group. We walked straight out the front door. The air outside felt lighter, freer. We got into the car and sat there for a minute in silence before he finally asked, "What happened?" I told him everything, the giggle, the doll, the footsteps. He didn't laugh, he didn't joke, he just stared ahead and said, "I saw something too, but it wasn't upstairs." I asked him what he meant, but he shook his head. "We'll talk later," he said. "Let's just get back." That night we couldn't sleep. Both of us felt like something was still with us, like something followed us home. And in the early hours of the morning, I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the wooden floor of the hotel room. We were on the 3rd floor, and the room had carpet. We left San Diego the next morning, both of us more tired than we should have been after just one night. Neither of us talked much on the drive. I could tell Mike was rattled, even though he tried to play it off. He kept checking the rearview mirror like he expected something to be there. I didn't say anything about what I heard that night, those footsteps. Not yet. We got back to my apartment in LA by late afternoon. The plan was for Mike to crash on my couch for a few nights before heading back home. Everything felt normal again. The light, the noise of the city, the way the apartment felt lived in. It was comforting. But that comfort didn't last. That night I went to bed early. I was mentally exhausted and honestly, I just wanted to forget about everything. Sometime after midnight, I woke up in the dark. No sound, no movement. Just this sudden jolt, like something inside me had snapped awake before my body was ready. That's when I noticed the cold. It was freezing in my room. Not just cool, but bitter cold. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and listened. That's when I heard it. Thump. It came from the living room. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my heart beginning to pound. I told myself it was just Mike, maybe getting water or something. Thump. Thump. It wasn't footsteps, it sounded heavier, like something being dropped and dragged across the floor. I finally sat up and checked my phone. 2:11 a.m. I got out of bed and crept toward the hallway. The apartment was pitch dark except for the faint orange glow from the street lamp outside bleeding through the blinds. As I turned the corner, I could barely make out the living room. Mike was sitting on the couch, but something was off. He was sitting bolt upright, his head was tilted and his eyes were wide open, but he wasn't blinking. I whispered, "Mike." No response. I stepped closer slowly until I was standing just a few feet from him. That's when I noticed his hands were shaking. Not twitching, shaking, violently, like he was trying to hold something back. "Mike," I said, louder this time. He suddenly gasped and jolted like he'd just come up from underwater. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Then he said something I'll never forget. It was standing over me. I asked him what he meant. He said he woke up about an hour ago and couldn't move. He thought it was sleep paralysis until he saw something standing at the end of the couch. Not a person, not a shadow. He said it had the outline of a little girl, but its face was wrong. Like the features were there but slightly shifted, like someone had tried to draw a human face from memory and got it almost right. I told him about the footsteps in the hotel, the giggling in the Whaley house, and that's when we both realized whatever was in that house, it didn't stay behind. The next day, we tried to go on like normal, but neither of us could shake it. Lights flickered in the kitchen when no one was in there. My dog wouldn't stop barking at the corner of the living room. At night, we heard faint knocks on the bedroom doors, but no one was ever there. 3 nights after we got back, Mike had a nightmare. He screamed so loud I thought someone was breaking in. I ran into the living room and found him on the floor, drenched in sweat. He said in the dream, he was back in the nursery at the Whaley house, but this time he wasn't alone. Something crawled out from beneath the crib. It had no eyes, just dark, empty sockets. We decided we needed help. A cleansing, a blessing, something. But before we could figure out what to do next, things got worse. Because the next night I heard whispering. Not in my dreams. Not from another room. From inside my closet. I stood there for what felt like hours, frozen outside my bedroom closet. The whispering was faint, like someone was murmuring through clenched teeth. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was angry, urgent, and the worst part, it was coming from inside. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. My hands were shaking so bad the light danced across the room like it was underwater. I reached out slowly and gripped the closet handle. It was ice cold, no exaggeration, like the metal had been kept in a freezer. I took a deep breath and yanked it open. Nothing, just my clothes, a few boxes, some shoes. But the whispering had stopped. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Neither did Mike. He said he saw someone staring at him through the bathroom mirror just after midnight. He described the same face again. Feminine, childlike, but off. Like a mask that didn't quite fit. We decided we couldn't stay in the apartment anymore. The next morning we packed our things and went to stay at a cheap motel just outside the city. It was run down and smelled like cigarettes, but at least it was neutral ground. Or so we thought. That night something followed us there. I woke up at 3:26 a.m. to the sound of scratching. At first I thought it was someone in the next room. The walls were thin, and you could hear everything in that place, but the scratching wasn't muffled. It was sharp, right beside me, on the headboard. I turned slowly and saw it. A single pale hand resting at the top of the headboard. Just the fingers curled around the edge. I didn't scream, I couldn't. My body locked up completely. I blinked and it was gone, like it had never been there. I sat up, breathing hard, trying to convince myself I was dreaming. That's when Mike shot up from the other bed. He looked at me and said, "She's not done." I asked him what he meant, and he said, "She told me." In my dream, she said we opened the door.
Mike isn't the type to make stuff up. He's not a dramatic guy. When he talks like that, I believe him. And I believed him then more than ever. The next day, we called a local medium. Her name was Rosa, and she was the only one willing to meet us on such short notice. We told her everything, starting from the Whaley house. She listened without interrupting, then asked one question. Did you touch anything in the house?
I said no, but Mike hesitated. He looked at me and said, I took something from the courtroom. It was just a splintered piece of wood near the baseboard. I thought it was nothing. Rosa closed her eyes, muttered something under her breath and said, that's all it needs. A link. She explained that places like the Whaley house hold on to energy, and if something attaches to you, especially if you take something from it, you're inviting that energy to follow. She agreed to perform a cleansing, but warned us that once a spirit becomes active outside its origin, it can be unstable. Sometimes, she said, it doesn't know where it is anymore, just that it's angry. That night, Rosa came to the motel. She brought candles, herbs, and a small silver bell. The ritual was quiet, focused. We sat on the floor while she circled the room, chanting in a low, rhythmic voice. At first, nothing happened. Then the lights flickered, all of them, for about 3 seconds. And then the bell in her hand shattered, not dropped, not cracked. It shattered mid-air. She screamed and fell back. I rushed over and Mike helped her sit up. Her hand was bleeding from a deep cut. She looked terrified. Rosa, who'd been calm and collected all evening, now looked like she'd seen something she wasn't ready for. She said one thing before she left. You didn't just bring something back. You brought someone. After Rosa left, we sat in silence. Mike's hands were trembling again. The air in the motel room felt wrong. Thick, like we were underwater. Neither of us said it out loud, but we knew. This wasn't over. The bell didn't just break. It exploded, and Rosa, the one person we thought could help us, ran out of the room with a bleeding hand and the fear in her eyes. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the bathroom with the lights on, just staring into the mirror. Something about what Mike had said, about seeing someone watching him through it, got under my skin. The glass felt too still, too deep, like if I looked long enough, someone would look back. At 3 a.m. exactly, I heard the voice again, a whisper, female, from behind the mirror. Let me in. It didn't sound angry this time. It sounded tired, desperate. I backed out of the bathroom slowly and slammed the door shut. Mike was sitting on the floor, holding the piece of wood he'd taken from the Whaley house. He'd kept it this whole time, in the side pocket of his bag. I hadn't seen it until now. It looked like nothing, just a jagged splinter, dark and smooth from age. But as I stared at it, I swear it pulsed, like a heartbeat. I think we need to go back, he said. I told him he was insane, but he wasn't wrong. The next morning we drove 6 hours straight to San Diego. We didn't call ahead, we didn't ask permission, we just showed up at the Whaley house before it opened. The building stood there like it had been waiting for us. The windows were empty, the house was silent. We slipped around back and climbed through a loose panel in the fence, just like we had the first time. We made our way inside, through the creaking floorboards and stale air, until we stood once more in the courtroom. It was colder than I remembered. The silence was thick, my ears were ringing. Mike stepped forward and placed the splinter of wood exactly where he found it. He knelt down and whispered, "I'm sorry." And that's when the temperature dropped. Everything happened at once. The door behind us slammed shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The overhead light, barely working before, flashed on with a loud buzz. And we saw her, the girl. She was standing behind the judge's bench. Same as before, but now we could see her face. It was no longer blurred or hidden. It was twisted into a silent scream. Eyes wide, mouth open, her skin stretched like old paper. But what froze me wasn't her expression. It was the rope burns around her neck. She started to move toward us, not walking, but gliding. Her feet didn't touch the ground. Mike was paralyzed. His mouth hung open, eyes full of tears. I grabbed his arm, yelling for him to move. She got closer, closer, until I felt something cold and wet touch the side of my neck. And then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, we were outside, on the street. It was daylight. Mike was beside me, unconscious. A crowd had gathered. Someone had called 911. The official story was that we passed out from heat exhaustion, but we know the truth. The paramedics said Mike's body temperature had dropped below 90 degrees. They thought he'd fallen into a river or a freezer. We hadn't gone near water. We were discharged from the hospital later that day. Neither of us said a word for the entire drive home. Later, we looked it up. There had been multiple hangings in the old courthouse that once operated inside the Whaley house. Some records were missing, others redacted. But one detail stood out. A girl named Eliza was executed for a crime she didn't commit. They said she laughed as the rope was placed around her neck, but one witness reported she whispered something before the trapdoor opened. "I will come back. You will see me again." We never told anyone the full story. Not the paramedics, not our friends, not even the woman who tried to help us. The truth sounded too insane, like something out of a bad horror movie. But Mike and I knew what we saw. And more importantly, we knew what followed us home. After the incident at the Whaley house, we cut all ties with San Diego, moved out of state, got rid of everything we owned from that time, even clothes and electronics. We just wanted to start over, but she didn't care. 3 months later, I was getting used to a routine again. I started working nights at a 24-hour diner, something simple, quiet. Mike had moved into his sister's place across town. He said he needed space. I didn't blame him. One night, after a long shift, I got back to my apartment. It was just past 2 a.m. I tossed my keys on the table, kicked off my shoes, and walked to the bathroom. The lights flickered the second I turned them on. I stood in front of the mirror. My face looked different, paler, tired, but that wasn't what caught my eye. She was there again, not behind me, not in the room, inside the mirror. Her eyes locked onto mine. She didn't blink, she didn't move, but she was smiling. Not in a comforting way, more like she was finally home. I dropped the mirror off the wall and smashed it to pieces, but it didn't matter. Every reflective surface after that, my phone screen, a window at night, even a puddle, I saw her, always smiling, always watching. I called Mike the next morning. He sounded worse than I expected. I asked if she had come back for him too. He didn't answer. He just whispered, "I think she never left." He told me something had changed. The dreams weren't just dreams anymore. He said he'd wake up and find muddy footprints by his bed. Once he even found a noose made from his bed sheets, tied perfectly and placed on his pillow like a gift. 2 weeks later, Mike stopped answering his phone. I drove to his place. His sister said he hadn't come home in 3 days. They found his car parked near an abandoned church 10 miles out of town. The driver's seat was empty, the doors locked from the inside, no signs of a struggle, but on the rearview mirror, written in condensation, were 3 words: "You let me." That night I finally went through the only thing Mike left behind, his old notebook. He had been keeping a journal since the first incident at Whaley House. The final entry made my blood run cold. It wasn't about the wood, it wasn't about the house, it was about the moment we saw her, that acknowledgement, that attention. That's what gave her life again. All she needed was to be seen. I moved again after that. Different state, changed my name, cut off contact with anyone who knew about it. I don't own mirrors, I avoid windows after dark. My phone screen stays at the lowest brightness possible, but sometimes, late at night, I still feel it, like someone is standing just behind me, close enough to breathe on my neck. Sometimes I catch a flash of pale skin in the corner of my eye, or hear the creak of an old wooden floor, even when I live in a carpeted apartment. I don't know what Eliza wants. I don't know if she was ever a real person, or just a piece of all the pain and suffering soaked into that house. But I do know this: once you've seen her, once you've acknowledged her, she never stops watching and she never forgets. If you ever visit the Whaley house, don't look too long into the mirrors, don't touch anything, and whatever you do, don't acknowledge her, because once you do, she's yours.